distribute it to attendees if need be. And again, my name is Kurt Quiggle. I'll be talking today about integrations. And I don't know, I'm not always a rule follower, so whether or not we stick to 5 tips for designing and such, I might break that rule a little bit. So we'll just kind of dive in a little bit on the topic. If I can get my slide deck to move forward, that would be fabulous. There we go. There's a terrible picture of me. We'll go right past that. And what we want to talk about today is a little bit about what is an integration. And once we understand that, basically what it is, it's a map of data going between systems. And then we'll cover some, just kind of looking at some out of the box in certain software titles, some templates, some examples, just really kind of dig in. And then I'd like to talk a little bit about, again, troubleshooting and integration. And our number 5 then would be, I would say more along the lines of a good fit, bad fit. And hopefully I can cover that in a half hour. So understanding what is an integration. So typically in this context, we are sitting with Microsoft Dynamics GP or BC or some other ERP as the hub of our organization. And throughout the organization, there's many other sources of information that would be helpful if it was, let's use the word imported into our ERP system. For example, if I have somebody with a mobile device out doing sales and service, I would want to be able to bring that information into my ERP system if they made a sale. We would also like to be able to pass information to that mobile device to tell it, hey, John, you have a service call. You need to go see Kurt in DL and take care of things for him. So again, that information being handed back and forth between software systems is often referred to by us as an integration. And what it really comes down to is the idea of moving information at a transactional level between systems. That's what an integration is to me. Now, of course, to support a transaction, we also would need master record information. Master records are customers, account numbers, vendors, service calls, etc. Jobs, if we're doing job costing, things along those lines. And some of my fancy icons that I threw on here, I mean, an online shopping solution, right? We maybe have a catalog on an online store, we're doing sales there. We need to bring that information into our ERP in order to capture that sale. So again, different ways we want to move information between systems. I also listed Excel as a system. I've been working with accountants for years, and I wish I was as good at Excel as most of the people I support. And often it's the magic sauce is if you can just get it in Excel, it's usable. Well, within most of our mapping tools or integration tools, I can bring information in from an Excel spreadsheet. So if my other system can drop information to an Excel spreadsheet, I should be able to consume it. All right, so that is a little bit about what an integration is. Now, talking a little bit more about the concepts of an integration. So in either direction, we have a source, we have a destination, and we have to write a map. And we're going to open up software and we're going to look at what we're talking about. And whenever we do an integration between systems, we have to follow the business logic, whatever that business logic happens to be. in inbound information into Microsoft Dynamics GP, I have to have certain required fields automatically filled in or magically filled in, or I won't be able to save that record. I won't be able to create a valid record in GP. So we're going to just talk a little bit about all of that. And again, I'm going to utilize a Microsoft's Integration Manager tool as my example. And Integration Manager is kind of a funny looking application. And all it is a place to create, store, and run an integration, or another word I like to use is a map, okay? And there's other products. So that was another one of the tips I wanted to cover today. Integration Manager, E1 has Smart Connect, there's Scribe, there's others out there in the marketplace that do just this in different ways, shapes, forms, etc. Gives us the ability to move data between differing systems, okay? So again, thinking about that last slide that I had up, integrations have a source and they have a destination. And when we look at the creation of an integration, if I'm going to create a new integration and give it a name, well, demo, I guess we could call it webinar. And we save that integration. Now, what's the first thing that pops up on the screen? I'm going to create it, and it needs a source and it needs a destination. Pretty simple, and it's going to contain a map. So what types of sources are there? So in Integration Manager, we can have a simple text file be a source. So a customer, and I'm just going to hit preview on that so you can see what's contained in that file. And it's an ID, it's a name, address information, pretty raw information. That source could be a file from another accounting system. It could be from that website. It could be from, again, that handheld device. But in this case, in its simplest format, it's nothing more than a text file. And often, you know, if you call in and you're like, oh, we'd really like to be able to import this information, and you might have a picture of an invoice, a PDF of an invoice. The first thing one of the consultants are going to ask you is, can we get that in any other format? Can I get that in a text format? Can I get that in an Excel format? Because if we can get that in a textual data-oriented format, we can import it. We can find a way to import it into your system. The other side of an integration is, where is it going? What are my destinations? And again, I'm just going to click on destinations in this particular software, Integration Manager. And we have two destinations within Integration Manager that are differentiated, okay? Microsoft Dynamics GP and Microsoft Dynamics GP eConnect. We'll talk about those just briefly, but this one's pretty obvious, right? What is my destination? It's my Microsoft Dynamics GP environment. And within it, where do I want to go? Do I want to go to financials? Am I creating a GL account? A bank rec entry? A bank transaction entry? Am I bringing in a budget? Fixed allocation account? A journal entry? Unit account setup? Variable allocation account setup? Okay. So those are all considered areas within financial that I can write an integration to. And if we look at, again, since I'm kind of a distribution guy, let's look at sales. I can hit a sales transaction entry window. Now, destinations in other tools like E1 Smart Connect, that tool for a destination might be your CRM environment, your GP environment, your Salesforce environment. It could be a cloud, again, website environment, because when we walk into some of the other tools outside of the GP space, and we go into like an E1 Smart Connect tool, it's been written to connect to multiple types of software, not just multiple places within the software. So again, this is one of our most simplistic tools that we rely on to write integrations. Now, within this tool, since there is 2 destinations listed, we should talk briefly about what the difference is. And you'll see that the titles themselves are still similar, right? And within that as well, if we look at financial, it's a little different. I don't have all of the same things I could create from here that I have, here. And again, it's because it's using a little bit different import engine into GP, okay? So our top one is kind of a macro-driven tool. It's importing that information into an open GP window. It literally opens it behind the scenes, and it types in the data for us. It's a macro generating tool. Our bottom one, our eConnect tool, this is more, it's interacting with a product in the environment called eConnect, and it's literally a way in and out of GP without going through the interface itself. So if I write a integration using eConnect, I don't need to have GP open to run that integration. If I write it using a standard GP connection, I do have to have GP open in order to interact with a transaction in GP. Okay, now I'm going to kind of cover 2 birds with 1 stone. We're going to get rid of this, close this, and we're going to open an existing integration because our time is limited. And let's go ahead and look at that GL journal entry. Okay, so in this case, it's already written. This is a template. So back to that idea of, we're not starting from scratch. If you need to write an integration, most likely there's one in your environment already. We can look at how that was done, or out of the box, most of our software titles offer us some templates or some examples. So we look at that example and we can figure out, oh, that's how they did that, okay? So again, we have a source that is basically some information that creates a journal entry. So here we have a document number, a date, and a reference. That's our header or our top level grouping of information. And here's our line detail. So these 4 lines are going to go into one journal entry. These 2 lines are going to go into another one. I can tell that looking at our dates and our doc number. They're definitely different. All right. This little tidbit here is how these 2 files relate to each other. I can have more than 2 files in a source. Maybe I need 4 to create a transaction, etc. But this really just tells it how it joins together. And then let's look at that destination. Oops, let's click here. So our destination map, again, all an integration is a map of logic of what from the source file am I putting into GP and where am I going to put it into Dynamics GP. So at a very high level, again, creating a journal entry. What am I populating? So it's always good to understand, what are we doing? So at a bare minimum, if I was going to create a journal entry, my required fields are in red on my environment. You can set it up, your environment, that way as well by using user preferences. I like red, helps me identify those fields, but we need an entry number, we need a date, a source, a reference, currency ID. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then of course, we're going to want the account, a debit and a credit. So literally knowing what we're going to impact when we're in our tool, we should be able to see some of that same information. And again, journal entry number, use default. If I use a default, it means it's going to take the next number in system. If I change my rule to say use a constant, I could type in a journal entry number in the integration. Or I could say use a source field in case that source document contains a journal entry number and I want both systems to contain that journal entry number. So again, think of our integration writing as mapping fields to fields. So again, we gave this a constant of a batch number, and here's our first mapped field. So our reference on the document in GP is going to contain the source field reference from our source files. And now if I go down one more level into what's being put in for the entries, okay, right, general journal, this is our header. These are our lines. I'm going to go back. Everything up here, we call header. Everything down here, we call lines. Kind of silly, straightforward stuff, but it's good to know where I'm coming from when I talk about that. And again, here's a map. We're saying use a source field for our account number. For our debit amount, use any positive numbers. For our credit amount, use our negative numbers. It's all pretty straightforward, right? Now, I'm pretty sure I've probably ran this into GP multiple times, but the end game of all of this after we map something is to run it into GP. Running an integration basically just takes that information and imports it into GP. Use source field rule on journal entry. So I changed that to say source instead of default, and it said, hey, silly, you need a source field. Now, this is a common support call, and you learn it pretty quick. It's pretty straightforward. It also tells us what's going on. So remember, I had GP open, and I said that a standard integration in Integration Manager is going to integrate and talk to the window in GP. And in this case, it can't because I have a window open in GP already. That's what that error message means. So if I close my journal entry window, leave GP as is, come back to Integration Manager, let's run it again. Remember, I said it was going to bring in 2 documents. And here it says that, nice, 2 were tried and 2 failed. And they failed because my transaction dates do not fall within the fiscal year set up in my GP environment. Okay, so this is another great point to talk about in integrations. And I'm not keeping track of how many tips we've talked about. But here's my number 1 tip. Number 1, top of the list. If you're trying to run an integration and it fails, and you don't understand the error message that's coming up, our suggestion is to always go into Dynamics GP, open up the window you're trying to interact with, and see if you can key the same information. So again, if I were to come in here and key that information and say, you know, hey, silly, I want to hit 2022, I can't, right? Because Kurt was in here earlier in this environment and he flattened the entire calendar, and the only year that exists now is 2027. So in my test data, I'm a little bit broken, but it's not the end of the world. We'll go back in here, change that to a 7. I'm going to close that window. Now, let's go look at that source file, just for giggles. $17, nice. That's awesome. This is a really old source file. I'm going to fix it, and then we'll watch that run in real quick. And while I'm doing that, we'll just talk a little bit more about, again, the logic behind integrations and some of what can be done. In general, if we can see the window and get to the window, there is a tool that we should be able to use. It's not always Integration Manager. It might not always even be Smart Connect from E1, but we can usually find a path in for that integration, whether that is through a tool like this, or maybe even through SQL, because SQL is ultimately where everything lives. And I'm just hopping into where that file is stored. Okay, now, so ultimately, remember I was writing that map to say bring in a text file, and that GL header record text is right here. And in your environment, we would have a special place, not a samples directory, but a special directory where you'd put your source files and work with them. And at the end of an integration, we can write scripts to move them from that location and put them in an archive, which is pretty cool too. And here we're just going to change this to 27. And we'll hop back into Integration Manager. Let's take a quick peek. Looks like I did affect the right file. And we're just going to try again. Make sure we don't have any windows open in GP, and we'll run that map. Now I've got to be questioning what in the heck is going on, right? So why is it 8/10/2022? So something else is going on. It's not using my files, my timestamp for my file. So we need to go back and look at our mapping. And there's the reason we are having an issue. It's not using a source column. It's using my system date. My system date is 2022. Fabricam is running in 2027. So let's just fix that real quick. And this is no different than writing any integration. So it's actually kind of interesting that the errors are cropping up. It's actually helpful. So number one is always to remember that there's a lot of trial and error in getting one of these written and working the way you want. And a lot of things can be added as we learn more and more about how it works, as far as updating certain fields, doing certain things with it, okay? Now we're holding our breath. Let's see if this bugger will go. And we failed again. No, we didn't. We succeeded this time. Woohoo! Okay, so where did it go? Kind of my last topic. Where did it go? So now it's in GP. Well, it went into a batch. Okay. Let's go find it. And then I want to give a couple of minutes for QA. Two transactions, $3,000 total. Let's go ahead and look at this. Oh, that was a bad way to navigate. Terrible way to navigate. Let's open it up again. To source. Transactions. By batch. Okay, I am clearly doing that wrong, guys. Should straight up be my greatest number. There it is. Okay, not a great example of how to navigate GP. However, that is writing an integration to bring in a journal entry, many different tools to do so. And of course, we have our good old copy paste into GL. So that took away a lot of our integration magic in the last few years. We don't have to write them as often because there's copy paste functionality available. Chad, how are we doing? Anybody with a question out there?
No questions at the moment, Kurt, so I would highly recommend anybody out there, if you have any questions on what Kurt's covered or maybe hasn't covered, whatever, please submit those. I did share a couple of links to all of you via the chat box. One to our WS Tools page if you're interested in viewing some of the tools that Kurt was talking about, and then also our events page where you can find, where you'll be able to find today's recording as well as all of the other previous webinars and their recordings if you're interested in learning. Currently not seeing any questions as of yet. Like I said, I will be providing the recording to all of you that may have missed that earlier. And yeah, so that just tells me, Kurt, that you must have did a great job. Nobody has any questions, so everybody understands clearly, right?
Right. Well, just briefly, integrations and things like that are topics that we often talk about, at our conference coming up in November. And we would go into much more detail, and we would talk more along the lines of, real problems we've solved using integration tools. Sometimes we actually take information out of GP itself, manipulate it with some code, and bring it back in with an integration in order to affect, a subledger or a ledger uniquely. So there's a lot of magic we can do when we have the ability to import information directly into the accounting system. And again, this applies to other environments besides Dynamics GP. The other platforms have ways in and ways out. And the longer I've been doing this job, the more I find, even in software that's not financial software, I often go look for that import export functionality as clients start asking questions about, can I get information from my insurance tracking software into GP? Well, let's go look and see if it has an export function. If it does, we capture the information on the screen, we export it to a file, and we import it into GP accordingly. So with that, I'm at time. I thank everyone for joining us today. And again, definitely a topic that needs much more than a half hour, but I hope I intrigued you enough to look at it as a possible solution as you move forward in your environments. Thanks for attending.
Yeah, be on the lookout for that recording, and just feel free to reach out if you have any questions at all. Kurt, do you have that contact us?
Oh, absolutely. Let's bring that up too. We'll get that slide.
Just in case anybody, wants to reach out. If you have any questions or think of something later on, just please feel free to reach out to us and let us know. But yeah, thanks again for everybody joining us today, and enjoy the rest of your week, and be on the lookout for future webinars. Kurt will be, and others will be talking about some of their other products and ways that we can help you in GP and all things Dynamics GP. So be on the lookout for that as well. Thanks, everybody.